Orion took a deep breath, steadying himself. His heart pounded softly in his chest, each beat resonating with a sense of anticipation mixed with hesitation. He glanced towards Tinkerer, meeting the wise yet unreadable expression on the man's face. "What if I choose a mythical element?" Orion asked quietly, his voice steady, yet carrying a subtle tremor of excitement and uncertainty. Tinkerer's smile deepened slowly, spreading into a gentle chuckle. The librarian's eyes sparkled, revealing a mixture of admiration and subtle amusement. "Ask yourself this, young Primus, are you truly powerful enough to withstand that knowledge? Or the test that inevitably follows such a choice?" Orion's brows knitted slightly, his thoughts whirling briefly in deep contemplation. He understood the gravity hidden within Tinkerer's casual tone. He was no fool. Mythical elements represented forces that even the most powerful beings struggled to grasp, let alone master. After a moment of careful consideration, Orion nodded solemnly, turning his gaze back toward the shelves. He took slow steps forward, heart resolute despite the complexity of his decision. Observing Orion carefully, Tinkerer's eyes followed his movements, slightly relieved that Orion was perhaps reconsidering his impulsive thoughts of selecting a mythical element. The librarian calmly cleared his throat, preparing to guide Orion further. "Well," Tinkerer began casually, a gentle tone of guidance entering his voice, "at your current level, apart from the mythical elements, the most difficult, and perhaps the worst choice, would undoubtedly be Dar." His words halted abruptly, eyes widening slightly as Orion's fingers closed around the thick, dark tome etched with sinister yet strangely alluring runes, the Book of Darkness element. Orion turned his head slightly, making direct eye contact with Tinkerer, lips curling into a faintly helpless, mildly exasperated smile. "Couldn't you have said this faster?" Before Tinkerer could utter another word, a sudden force wrapped itself swiftly around Orion. Darkness surged outward from the tome, enveloping him completely in an instant. The air around him warped, swirling into a dense, inky maelstrom. And in that very moment, Orion vanished from the room, swallowed whole by the darkness that had emerged from his chosen tome. Tinkerer stared blankly at the empty space Orion had just occupied, slowly shaking his head with a gentle sigh of resignation. A faint, rueful smile touched his lips, and he muttered softly to himself with a blend of amusement and mild exasperation, "Sigh, youth these days. Always so rash and eager, never willing to listen." Turning slowly away from the bookshelf, he moved leisurely towards the room's exit, shoulders relaxed despite the dramatic events moments ago. He casually brushed some imaginary dust from his sleeves, his thoughts already shifting toward a more immediate concern. "Oh well," he murmured lightly, seemingly unbothered. "Might as well have lunch first. He should be done by then, if he passes, that is." With calm steps, he exited the modest library, leaving only silence and faint echoes of Orion's presence behind. Elsewhere, Orion's vision adjusted rapidly as he found himself plunged into absolute darkness, a darkness more profound than anything he'd ever experienced. It surrounded him completely, infinite and suffocating, stretching beyond his senses in every possible direction. There was no solid ground beneath his feet, no sky overhead. Instead, he seemed to float within an endless abyss, devoid of even the faintest trace of illumination. Orion's vision slowly began to adjust as the suffocating darkness around him thinned, gradually losing its oppressive weight. Beneath his feet, a chill spread through his boots as they touched a surface of cold, polished black marble, smooth and mirror-like, so perfect that he could see his reflection clearly. He lifted his head slowly, feeling a heavy sense of wonder at the sheer immensity of the hall that now stretched endlessly around him. Its grandeur was overwhelming, immeasurable, infinite rows of towering thrones lined the vast hall, each throne unique, magnificent, and imposing in its own right. Some gleamed brilliantly, forged from pure starfire and studded with flawless gems, each gemstone catching non-existent light in a mesmerizing scene. Others were somber and forbidding, carved from obsidian and bone, stark yet majestic in their intimidation. Still others were crafted of living elements, woven from twisting vines, glowing crystal, or shifting elemental energies. Each throne was occupied by a shadowed figure whose features were hidden within impenetrable darkness, yet Orion could feel their powerful gazes locked firmly upon him. Their presence was undeniable, radiating an aura of supreme authority. Kings, emperors, gods, dragons, and entities whose existence spanned countless worlds, each emanating power that stirred Orion's soul. Without warning, these shadowed rulers rose in perfect unison. The movement was eerie and precise, synchronized to such perfection that it felt unnatural, almost ceremonial in its reverence. Then, with the same unsettling harmony, they bowed deeply toward Orion, foreheads descending slowly until they nearly touched the polished marble floor. A deep, resonant, genderless voice filled the expansive hall, its tone echoing powerfully, vibrating in Orion's very bones. "We kneel before our emperor. Rule us." As if summoned by these words, an immense throne materialized at the far end of the endless hall. It was colossal, imposing, carved entirely of obsidian and enveloped by a shroud of shifting shadows. Ancient runes etched into its surface glowed faintly, shimmering silver in the surrounding darkness. Above this throne, a crown of flickering silver-black flames floated forward with grace, slowly approaching Orion. The voice spoke again, pressing into him with undeniable insistence. "Sit. Rule." Orion's eyes narrowed slightly as his heart quickened. His instincts flared immediately, warning him that this was no simple gift, it was a test. The symbolism was clear: temptation in the form of power, a chance to measure the strength and clarity of his inner self. He stood still, neither immediately stepping forward nor turning away, his mind sharp, calm, and balanced between caution and resolve. After a thoughtful silence, he finally moved forward, each step deliberate and measured. Reaching out, he took the crown into his hands, feeling the cool, gentle flicker of the shadow flames. With purposeful control and calm authority, he placed it upon his head, not as a token accepted in blind desire, but as a choice made decisively, with a clear understanding of the responsibility it represented. In response, the shadowed figures lifted their heads slowly, not in celebration or approval, but in silent acknowledgement. They simply faded, and with them, the throne, the vast hall, and the vision itself dissolved back into darkness. The darkness shifted once more, replaced by something entirely different. Orion's senses sharpened as the faint crackle of embers and the acrid smell of smoke surrounded him. He stood upon an ancient battlefield, silent now, long after the final screams of war had faded into the distant echoes of memory. The earth was cracked, scorched, and blackened by fires long extinguished. Broken banners lay torn and tattered upon the ground, scattered among rusted armor, shattered weapons, and fragments of fallen warriors' bones. Ash drifted slowly from a heavy, gray sky, falling like mournful snow upon a landscape defined solely by loss and regret. Ghostly echoes of desperate screams, the clash of steel upon steel, and the agonized roars of ancient battles rippled faintly in the heavy air. From within the oppressive haze, shadowy figures began to coalesce, stepping forth to surround him. Their forms were vague and indistinct, shifting and blending like smoke caught in a gentle breeze. Their voices, however, were sharp and unmistakable, cutting deeply, laden with accusation and scorn. "You failed us," whispered one voice, cold as winter's breath. "Your pride cost us everything," hissed another, thick with bitterness. "You were too arrogant to listen," said a third, dripping with contempt. They circled him, their accusations merging into an overwhelming curse that pressed inward from every side, attempting to crush Orion beneath the weight of guilt and failure. The pressure was almost physical, urging him to lower his head, to accept judgment and admit defeat. For a fleeting moment, he felt the tempting whisper of surrender, the urge to agree, to acknowledge the truth in their claims. But then, deep within his chest, Orion felt the stirring of something stronger. His gaze hardened, his stance firming with unwavering resolve. He would not bow, not here, not now, not to these echoes of doubt and despair. Orion straightened his spine and squared his shoulders, defying the invisible weight. His voice cut through the oppressive accusations with strength, resonating clearly and confidently across the ruined battlefield. "I have failed before. I will fail again. But I will never bow my head to my own shadow." At his words, the accusing figures faltered, their forms shuddering visibly. Their power weakened rapidly as Orion's determination and self-awareness blazed defiantly through their attempts to weaken him. Slowly, they began to crumble, each figure dissolving into drifting ash, caught and carried away by a wind that existed only to sweep them from existence. Orion stood motionless in the wake of the fading battlefield, the echoing accusations now silenced, leaving him alone in an empty void once more. His breathing was calm, steady, and his eyes remained focused ahead, vigilant for whatever awaited him next. Within this stillness, Orion gathered his thoughts, strengthening his resolve and reaffirming the essence of who he truly was. This place is testing my heart? After moments passed in quiet tension, the darkness around him began to shift once more. It stirred subtly, rippling gently like the surface of a deep lake disturbed by hidden currents. Gradually, those ripples intensified, the darkness seeming almost alive, breathing and coiling inward as though drawn toward Orion's presence. From beneath Orion's feet, thick tendrils of black mist rose with an eerie grace, wispy and delicate at first, but growing swiftly stronger, climbing upward to encircle him. They pulsed gently with an oily, abyssal luminescence, emitting a dark aura filled with ancient intent. Orion felt the air grow heavier, dense with an unnatural pressure, gently but insistently pressing against the edges of his mind, seeking entrance into the deepest reaches of his consciousness. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the first whispers reached his ears, faint and indistinct, mere fragments carried by ghostly sounds drifting through the darkness. Their initial tone was deceptively gentle, almost soothing, coaxing and lulling in their quiet insistence. "You could be more." One whispered softly, caressing the edge of Orion's mind like velvet wrapped around a blade. "You could be unstoppable." Another breathed enticingly, dripping promises of power in a silky, honeyed voice. "All you must do is let go." The tendrils of mist grew bolder, climbing higher and brushing softly against Orion's shoulders, caressing him like a living entity. Each touch sent a subtle tug deep within his chest, as though seeking cracks in the barriers of his heart. Something within this darkness hungered to peel away his defenses, to delve beneath the surface and pry open the gates protecting his very core. As the whispers grew louder, they multiplied rapidly, weaving together in overlapping layers. Their chorus surrounded him, voices both honey-sweet and sharp-edged, their intent equally tempting and venomous. "Your achievements are nothing," mocked a cruel voice, cutting sharply into Orion's pride. "What have you truly gained?" "All your victories, all your titles," sneered another, thick with disdain, meaningless without true dominion. Simultaneously, visions unfolded around Orion, vivid and enticing illusions birthed by the darkness itself. He saw twisted, corrupted versions of his own abilities, black flames roared from his palms, flames that devoured all life they touched, leaving only ashes and ruin. Violet-black lightning crackled violently, shattering bodies and souls alike, leaving only echoes of agony behind. The world tree sapling within him was warped into a horrific abomination, towering roots and branches twisted with rot and dripping with decay, consuming rather than nurturing. In these visions, countless figures bowed before him, not from respect or admiration, but out of pure, primal fear. Even the Limitless system appeared corrupted, its usually clear and comforting interface now streaked with crimson and black sigils pulsing grotesquely like open wounds, its essence warped and enslaved by darkness. Orion felt an icy chill creeping at the edge of his heart, whispers of the abyss probing carefully, testing the strength of his resolve. For a fleeting moment, the visions gripped him tighter. The sight of himself wreathed in black fire and violet thunder, entire armies collapsing under his will, the world itself bending to his command, it was intoxicating. A strange stillness settled in his chest, but it was not fear, nor hesitation, but an almost dangerous curiosity. Wouldn't it be easier? Wouldn't it be faster? The whispers leaned in, sensing his wavering, voices brushing against his mind like silk. You were born to rule without question. Why waste time pretending otherwise? The crown in the vision seemed to fit perfectly on his head. The corrupted world tree towered behind him like a monument of victory. For a single heartbeat, Orion could see himself wearing this future, and believing it was right. But deep within, Orion felt the fierce, defiant stirring of something ancient and unyielding. His heritage roared to life, the blazing pride of the true Fire Dragon Emperor, the unrelenting authority of the true Thunder Dragon Emperor, the eternal vitality of the world tree, and the imperious will of the human emperor. A faint, confident smile slowly curved his lips as his aura ignited, golden-red fire flaring upward, arcs of crackling thunder lashing outward, emerald light radiating like a living sun. The reaction from the darkness was immediate, the tendrils that had caressed him now recoiled violently, hissing as if burned. The corrupted visions around him fractured like shattered glass, fragments of abyssal light scattering into the void. The corrupted system interface blinked and fizzled, runes stuttering before breaking apart entirely. The void itself seemed to ripple, as though some vast unseen creature had been struck deep in its core. The whispers faltered, tripping over themselves in panic before twisting into shrill, wordless screams. "You think you can define me?" Orion's voice was clear, each word resonating like a tolling bell. "I am not your vessel. I am not your servant. I am Primus Zalzarion Draconis, and I bow to nothing." The declaration hit like a shockwave, the tendrils disintegrated into smoke, the void convulsed once more, and then the entire oppressive presence burst apart in a blinding wave of light and fading shadow. As the oppressive presence vanished, Orion stood unwavering within the restored silence, his heart beating rapidly. The suffocating heaviness had lifted completely, leaving behind only clarity and stillness. The abyssal temptation had sought to undermine his foundations, to corrupt his heart and twist his resolve, but it had failed completely. Looking around him, Orion took a deep breath. Was this the legendary corruption of the darkness element? No wonder others succumbed to it. He stood motionless in the aftermath of the corruption trial, the void around him settling into a quiet, tense stillness. His breathing was steady, heartbeat calming down. He felt no lingering doubt or fear, only clarity remained, his mind tempered into an unbreakable blade. Deep within himself, he recognized that he had overcome something that could easily shatter weaker souls. Yet Orion knew instinctively that the final test still awaited him. The void began to shift subtly, vibrating gently around him like the faint, rhythmic beat of drums echoing across distant battlefields. The air thrummed with an invisible tension, whispering silently that the decisive moment was at hand. Slowly, the darkness ahead parted like heavy velvet curtains, revealing an immense obsidian mirror suspended in the nothingness before him. Its towering form radiated an ancient and foreboding presence. Its black stone frame was etched with runes of such profound antiquity that Orion felt their resonance deep within his bones, humming softly with echoes of power that surpassed any he'd yet encountered. The mirror's dark surface rippled gently, moving like fluid shadows. It was unlike any ordinary reflection. Orion felt distinctly that this mirror was conscious, aware, watching him with intent as penetrating as his own gaze. Steeling himself, Orion moved forward slowly, step by step, approaching the mirror's imposing form. As Orion drew near, the mirror's surface twisted and churned, its shadows reshaping into something unexpected. It didn't reflect Orion himself, not immediately, not exactly, but rather a vision far grander and infinitely more imposing. The figure gradually formed within the blackness, revealing itself clearly. Orion recognized it instantly, as the vision was unmistakably drawn from the pride, legacy, and grandeur of all his dormant bloodlines merged seamlessly into one perfected form. The majestic flames of the true fire dragon emperor roared in golden brilliance, blazing like a sun's core around the figure's shoulders and crown. Violent arcs of violet lightning crackled fiercely, encircling its mighty limbs, signifying the dominance of the true thunder dragon emperor. Twisting emerald roots and vibrant branches from the serene yet inexorable world tree shaped themselves into a regal mantle, a symbol of life's unyielding vitality. And finally, eyes that burned like twin suns of unwavering command, the imperious gaze and boundless authority of the human emperor. All these powers, strengths, and lineages converged into a single form, a supreme, sovereign Orion, standing taller, broader, radiating an overwhelming majesty that made even the endless void tremble with reverence. The entire vision exuded a presence so powerful, so complete, that the very concept of subservience seemed inconceivable. When it spoke, the figure's voice was a layered harmony of Orion's own tones merged with the resonant authority of his bloodlines, rich and commanding, vibrating through the void. "We are the pride you were born with. The inheritance you have yet to command. We are your crown, your throne, your birthright. With grace, the reflection took a single step forward within the obsidian mirror, its overwhelming presence radiating outward, neither threatening nor malicious, yet carrying an undeniable challenge that pressed against Orion's very soul. Take us, and you shall stand as the one true emperor. Fail, and we will rule you instead. The void held its breath, suspended in that instant between challenge and response. Orion felt a powerful gravitational pull from this being, recognizing how easy it would be to simply allow its strength to lead him, to accept this manifestation of his birthright and use its powers. The thought was dangerously seductive. To yield to it felt natural, perhaps even destined. Yet Orion's eyes narrowed slightly, sharpening with resolute clarity. He had already conquered corruption, he had already subdued his shadows. He now faced not merely temptation or despair, but the most insidious allure of all, the pride and power that were rightfully his by birth. He stood at the precipice, understanding that this trial tested the very nature of sovereignty itself. A faint, knowing smile formed slowly upon Orion's lips as comprehension flowed through him like crystalline waters. His voice was steady, carrying a quiet authority that matched or even surpassed that of the reflection before him. A true emperor does not bow, not even to oneself. With calm certainty, Orion stepped forward and placed his open palm flat upon the mirror's cool, liquid-like surface. Immediately, the perfected reflection pressed back, energies of fire, thunder, life, and sovereignty surging into Orion simultaneously. It was overwhelming, not a single force, but four distinct wills crashing into him like roaring storms. The true fire dragon emperor's pride flared first, a roaring inferno that sought to burn away anything unworthy. Heat seared through Orion's veins, as if molten gold was replacing his blood. The flames whispered a single thought: only one who endures the sun may wear its crown. Almost on its heels came the true thunder dragon emperor's pride, jagged and violent. Bolts of violet lightning lanced through his mind, each crack of thunder threatening to shatter his consciousness into splinters. Its voice rumbled like a sky about to split open: if you cannot stand against the storm, you will kneel before it. Before he could recover, the world tree's pride surged upward, roots and branches winding around his spirit. They constricted, trying to bind and entangle his will, as though testing whether he could break free of life's own grasp. The earth itself seemed to murmur, "Can you bear the weight of eternity without bending?" And then came the human emperor's pride, the most subtle yet suffocating of them all, an authority so absolute it sought to override his will entirely. It didn't shout, it didn't say anything. It remained the most mysterious. Orion's body trembled under the combined onslaught. His aura flickered, flames dimming, lightning stuttering, the emerald glow of life force wavering. His heartbeat pounded like a war drum in his ears, each thud a reminder that he stood on the knife's edge between mastery and submission. For a moment, the reflection's crown seemed to lower toward his head, as if ready to claim him instead. But Orion's eyes snapped open wider, blazing with bone-deep pride. Through clenched teeth, he growled, "You are mine. You walk when I walk. You stop when I stop. My pride is not your leash, it is my sword." His aura exploded outward, fire roaring hotter, lightning striking sharper, the world tree's roots blooming instead of binding, and the human emperor's authority accepting him as a whole. One by one, the four forces bent, not in defeat, but in recognition. The reflection within the mirror shuddered, resistance fracturing under Orion's unbreakable will. Cracks rapidly spread across the obsidian surface, lines of brilliant golden, emerald, and violet light searing through the ancient runes. With a thunderous roar, the mirror fractured completely, shattering into countless fragments of radiant crystal. Shards scattered into the darkness, dissolving into shimmering motes of energy that flowed toward Orion in an unstoppable tide, merging seamlessly into his body, settling upon him like an imperial mantle. The acceptance of these energies seemed to have progressed something deep within Orion. He felt both lighter and stronger, standing upon foundations of pride, legacy, and sovereignty forged into an indomitable core. A profound, deep voice filled the void, echoing with ancient authority and boundless respect. Pride that stands unbroken is sovereignty. You are worthy. Paragon of pride. Ding. Paragon of Pride title acquired. Ding. Lineage understanding progression. Human Emperor. 1%. True Thunder Dragon Emperor, 10%. True Fire Dragon Emperor, 10%. World Tree, 10%. Chapter 385, returning. Orion's eyes widened in astonishment as the stream of notifications flashed vividly across his vision. Each glowing line resonated deeply within him, heralding the transformations that had taken root. The difference in progression percentages made him blink in surprise, especially the mere 1% in the Human Emperor bloodline. Before he could delve deeper into its meaning, Lumi's excited voice echoed clearly within his consciousness. You started comprehending your legacies, Master. Orion inhaled slowly, steadying himself at this realization. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Before he could respond aloud, however, reality shifted sharply around him, the void dissolving like mist under sunlight. The familiar, modest library once again materialized around him, the faint scent of aged parchment and polished wood taking him back into reality. The calm ambience stood in stark contrast to the trials he had just faced, filling him with subtle comfort. Tinkerer stood quietly in the same position as earlier, a gentle smile playing across his lips, eyes twinkling with amusement. Looks like it was a successful adventure, he remarked lightly, clearly having returned from lunch. Orion turned slowly to face him, letting out a sigh tinged with relief and lingering astonishment. A rueful smile curved his lips as he shook his head. He said, "It was far more dangerous than I expected. I wasn't prepared for something quite like that when I arrived." Tinkerer merely chuckled softly, his eyes reflecting gentle understanding and pride. "The Akashic Library never offers easy knowledge," he reminded kindly, "but you overcame admirably." His gaze drifted behind Orion, his expression growing subtly curious. "And it appears you've gained far more than just a simple spell." Orion raised an eyebrow, following Tinkerer's line of sight. To his surprise, a crystal floated silently behind him, emitting a faint aura of darkness that felt rich and boundless. Its surface pulsed gently, resonating harmoniously with his own newly acquired understanding. Inscribed clearly upon its surface, etched with refined yet intimidating script, read the title. Oblivion Codex of Eternal Night. Orion hesitated briefly before reaching out. The moment his fingertips brushed against its cool, smooth surface, the crystal ceased floating and gently dropped onto his palm, its presence heavy with immense potential and profound knowledge. Tinkerer's voice resonated calmly beside him, breaking Orion's contemplative trance. "That's a top-tier grimoire, on the level of an Empyrean-grade treasure," he explained casually, admiration flickering subtly in his tone. "Not a bad reward for someone of your world. Yet, given your circumstances, this was the absolute limit your psyche could withstand safely. Had your cultivation or mental strength been higher, perhaps something even more profound might have been yours." Orion carefully stored the Oblivion Codex into his inventory, inwardly acknowledging the gravity of Tinkerer's words. Turning back towards the librarian, he inclined his head respectfully, sincerity filling his gaze. "Thank you for guiding me, and for everything." Tinkerer's gentle smile deepened into an expression of quiet fondness. Shaking his head slightly, he spoke in a voice suffused with genuine warmth. "It is truly rare to receive visitors here. I'm sincerely glad you arrived." Yet, his gaze lingered thoughtfully upon Orion. "It appears our paths will cross again." Orion chuckled softly, turning his head toward the doorway, his gaze drifting thoughtfully toward the grand, limitless expanse outside, toward the luminous core of the Akashic Library itself, a beacon of endless wisdom. "There are far too many treasures hidden here," he mused aloud, eyes shining with anticipation, "for me to visit only once." Tinkerer's eyes crinkled with amusement as he shook his head gently, understanding perfectly the allure of knowledge. "Indeed, young Primus, curiosity is a never-ending road." He exhaled lightly, his voice growing gentler. "Well then, if you'll excuse me, I must put my children to sleep. You can return safely now." With these final words, Tinkerer turned calmly, stepping through the modest library door into a softly illuminated interior. As he vanished from view, Orion felt the space around him distort slightly. A protective layer of energy wrapped securely around him, gentle yet unyielding, guiding him back along invisible pathways through the fabric of reality itself. In the span of a heartbeat, Orion once again appeared inside his room. He stood quietly for a moment, the serene silence wrapping gently around him like a comforting blanket. Evening sunlight poured softly through the windows, casting warm hues upon the wooden floor, the desk, and his large bed. Familiar scents, parchment, mana-infused ink, and the faint fragrance of the flowers outside, filled his senses, washing away the last remnants of tension from the trials within the Akashic library. He released a slow, drawn-out exhale, savoring the comforting presence of the mansion he knew so well. After everything he'd experienced, the stability of familiar surroundings was deeply reassuring. Without any more delay, Orion walked slowly towards his bed, each step gentle yet heavy with the fatigue of the trials. As he laid down, the soft mattress embraced him, easing the remaining tightness in his muscles. Staring upward, his gaze drifted towards the intricately carved wooden beams of the ceiling, lost in thought. Lumi's gentle, chiming voice broke the peaceful silence of his mind, her small, glowing screen drifting lightly into his field of view. "That was quite something, Master." Orion's lips curled lightly into a faint smile at her words, though his expression soon shifted into thoughtful seriousness as he reflected deeply on the strange details of his recent breakthrough. "Anyways," he murmured quietly, eyebrows slightly furrowed in contemplation, "why did my human emperor lineage understanding only increase by 1%? During the trials, I felt as if my comprehension of the human and dragon bloodlines increased equally. This discrepancy is puzzling." Lumi's floating screen hovered closer, bobbing slightly as though in deep thought. A brief moment passed before she responded softly. "I don't know either, Master. Your human emperor lineage is far more obscure. At least we have distinct legacies from your dragon bloodlines, and you also have the world tree within your sea of consciousness, making them easier to grasp and understand. But the human emperor lineage, all we know about that is from Grandpa Eldric's vague stories." Orion sighed softly, his eyes deepening with thoughtfulness. "Yes, perhaps it's time I started actively seeking more details about the human emperor. If I'm going to unlock and harness this bloodline's true potential, I must fully comprehend its origins and secrets." Lumi nodded approvingly, her screen blinking affirmatively. The silence that followed was thoughtful, carrying a sense of gentle urgency. After a pause, Orion's voice took on a firmer, more determined tone. "Now that I have the Oblivion Codex, I need to begin memorizing its contents. If I'm to form the Darkness Affinity Rune along with the Light Affinity Rune, it must be done simultaneously. Otherwise, the risk is too great." Lumi voiced her agreement instantly, her tone grave despite the cute kanji displayed. "Absolutely, Master. We've both experienced firsthand the corruptive and insidious nature of the darkness element. Even though your lineages temporarily resisted it, once you form its rune, we can't predict what may happen." Orion nodded solemnly, breathing out another soft exhale. "Precisely. My preparation must be thorough, both mentally and physically." His thoughts drifted slightly, recalling another responsibility, and he continued thoughtfully. "Tomorrow, I also have to go with Magi to secure the workers, and finalize arrangements regarding the new properties." Chapter 386, Acting on Plans. Lumi tilted her virtual screen in confusion, question marks appearing playfully. "Huh? Didn't you already purchase the properties earlier today, Master?" Orion shook his head slightly, eyes narrowing. "No, those purchases were merely decoys for any watching eyes. The real properties must be bought through discreet third parties, without my name appearing anywhere. There might be spies even within our estate. I can only fully trust Uncle Edgar and Brother Lucan, no one else. And enough people saw me purchasing those properties, so they will have their eyes on those." Lumi's screen flashed surprise, then admiration. "Oh. That's quite smart. Honestly, I didn't expect such cautious thinking from you." Orion's lips twitched hearing her words, his tone turning slightly playful. "It seems someone is in dire need of a good spanking. Have I been treating you a little too gently lately?" Lumi immediately responded by sticking her tongue out cheekily at him. Sigma Blay. Orion chuckled softly at her playful antics, but his expression quickly turned serious again as another matter pressed upon his thoughts. And another matter, I must finally address Fiora's situation. It's been delayed far too long due to everything else demanding my attention. Lumi quieted down instantly, her screen flickering thoughtfully. Oh, you mean her draconian lineage issue? Orion nodded solemnly. Yes. Grandma told me clearly that keeping Fiora's memories sealed is severely hindering her cultivation and emotional growth. If I continue to leave them suppressed, then she might have issues with her cultivation. Lumi sighed softly, her window gently shifting, as though echoing his feelings of responsibility. There are indeed many pressing tasks piling up. Orion offered a helpless yet determined smile, feeling the weight of numerous responsibilities pressing onto his shoulders. Closing his eyes briefly, he murmured quietly, outlining his plans aloud to reinforce his resolve. I'll resolve Magi's issue early tomorrow morning. Afterward, I'll dedicate the afternoon to Fiora's matter and see how it goes. Then, I can spend the evening and night memorizing the Oblivion Codex, if I get the time. I can also read the Codex after resting for a bit. His voice softened gradually, exhaustion seeping into his tone as he finally surrendered to the day's accumulated fatigue. The trials in the Akashic Library had indeed burdened his psyche heavily. Soon, his breathing became steady and rhythmic as he drifted into deep, much-needed sleep. Lumi floated quietly near Orion, her glowing screen dimming slightly, thoughtful yet gentle. After a long moment, she whispered softly to herself, barely audible, almost wistful. Master forgot to check the title benefits. She watched over him protectively, allowing silence to fall comfortably across the room, knowing well that despite the countless tasks ahead, tonight Orion needed rest above all else. Orion's eyes snapped open abruptly, greeted instantly by warm sunlight filtering through the curtains of his room. The vibrant morning hues painted gentle patterns across his bed, softly illuminating his surroundings. He sat upright swiftly, his hair slightly tousled from sleep, eyes blinking rapidly to clear the lingering fog of exhaustion. Fuck, it's morning already, he muttered quietly, voice still filled with remnants of sleep. Instantly, Lumi's small, glowing screen popped cheerfully into existence, floating directly before his face. Her voice was bright, infused with playful teasing. Good morning, Master. Looks like you were heavily exhausted from that test. Orion sighed softly, a faint smile forming despite himself at her cheerful demeanor. Shaking his head gently, he swung his legs over the edge of the bed, feeling the soft carpet beneath his bare feet. Seems so, he acknowledged dryly. Standing slowly, he stretched briefly before walking over to the tall windows, pushing the curtains further open. The mansion grounds stretched before him, bathed in soft morning sunlight, the garden still glistening with early dew. A fresh breeze slipped through the slightly ajar windows, gently caressing his face. He took a deep, steadying breath, allowing the crisp morning air to fully awaken his senses. Well, Orion murmured softly, his expression sharpening with determination. Now that I'm up, there's no reason to delay things any further. Lumi's screen bobbed approvingly beside him. Exactly. There's a lot to do today, Master. He nodded in silent agreement, turning away from the comforting view outside the window. Orion sat quietly inside the elegantly appointed carriage, different from his usual luxurious obsidian carriage. Opposite him was Edgar, stoic and attentive, maintaining an aura of calm as a rock. Beside Edgar were two figures dressed entirely in black, their faces obscured beneath dark hoods and masks, emanating a faint but undeniable presence of power. After a quiet pause, Orion broke the silence gently, his voice calm. You two are the ones Grandpa sent to train the people under me? Both hooded figures bowed their heads in immediate acknowledgement. One of them spoke, his voice steady and respectful. Yes, young master. Orion nodded slightly in response, satisfied enough with their straightforward reply. He didn't press further, instead turning his gaze thoughtfully towards the passing scenery visible through the carriage window. His mind wandered momentarily, quietly calculating the tasks and responsibilities that awaited him. Inside the limitless heaven, Orion sat comfortably on the plush leather sofa within Magi's private office. Edgar stood silently beside Orion, arms folded loosely, alert eyes calmly observing the surroundings. And beside Edgar stood the two hooded figures, their quiet but solid presence creating an air of seriousness. Across from Orion sat Magi, his casual demeanor tinged with professional attentiveness. A soft glow surrounded them all, the faint shimmer of the silent hall cube subtly enclosing their conversation, ensuring absolute confidentiality. Orion spoke first, breaking the silence clearly and directly. "You got the property papers yesterday, right?" Magi immediately nodded in confirmation, leaning forward slightly as he answered, "Yes, boss. After you left, Lucan found me outside and handed them over to me." Orion acknowledged this with a quiet hum. "Good. Remember, those properties are decoys. Use them openly, indulge in some minor shady business, just enough to satisfy the curiosity of those prying nobles. Keep their eyes occupied." Magi raised an intrigued eyebrow, a playful smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "Damn, boss. And here I thought I was the only smart one around here." Orion's lips twitched faintly, a glimmer of amusement briefly flickering in his otherwise serious expression. "He really is punchable, should I turn him into a girl?" He shook his head lightly, choosing to ignore the playful remark as he continued with calm focus. "As for the real properties, use the shop's funds discreetly. Purchase locations across the capital and nearby cities slowly, under third-party identities. These will be the actual operational bases for our future organization." Magi listened carefully, nodding appreciatively. "Understood clearly, boss." Orion's gaze sharpened slightly as he moved to the next important matter. "Also, later today, you'll accompany these two men in disguise to secure workers. Preferably purchase-trained, high-quality individuals from the slave market. We need capable and efficient people." At this, Magi glanced skeptically toward the two hooded figures. He hesitated briefly before speaking cautiously, "Boss, are you sure we can trust them completely?" Orion met Magi's eyes firmly, nodding with absolute certainty. "Yes. If Grandpa personally sent them, then there's no doubt about their loyalty or capability. Trust them completely, Magi." Hearing the resolute confidence in Orion's voice, Magi relaxed visibly, giving a firm nod in understanding. "All right, boss. If you trust them, then so do I, consider it done." Satisfied, Orion rose smoothly from his seat, signaling the meeting's conclusion. "That's enough from me. If anything important arises or if you need to discuss anything else, just send a letter to my mansion." Magi stood respectfully, meeting Orion's eyes earnestly. "Don't worry, boss. If something serious comes up, I'll personally come to the mansion myself." Orion gave Magi a subtle nod of approval, turning to leave with Edgar following closely behind. They soon exited the office, leaving Magi sitting there with the two shadowy figures. Magi softly muttered, "I wonder what the name of the organization will be. Magi's Legion. That has a nice ring to it. I should suggest it to boss." The two shadowy figures looked at the shameless bastard speechlessly. The carriage rolled gently back toward the mansion, Orion seated once again in silent contemplation. His mind now moved swiftly toward the tasks ahead, particularly Fiora's unresolved situation. Lumi floated quietly beside him, observing his thoughtful expression closely. Finally, she broke the silence, her tone soft yet encouraging. "One step at a time, Master. We'll handle everything together." Omega. Orion inwardly nodded, "Yes, I'm just wondering how I should go about this situation. Should I do it in the mansion, or outside? Or should I take her out on a date and at the end of it unseal her memories?" Thanks for reading.